seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. So
being able to showing up at your inauguration if you happen to get elected, which ain't gonna happen. Everybody I talk to don't like it. Ain't nobody.
Of the Democrats, to me, has backfired as far as everything is about. I should hate Trump so much.
Just as bad as Joe, but you gotta say no to the hoe. And I take cash card or Venmo, but you gotta say no to the.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys right now that lecturing men does not work. Now, guys, before we get started, this right here is like the second video of the day that I want to release on this topic when it comes to the topic of masculinity. However, the first video will be at noon. I made it last night. It primarily focuses on the overall general, how do I say, let's just say masculinity in the sense that Democrats aren't getting, or they're not appealing to masculinity because they've been attacking masculinity for so many years. And of course, they're kind of baffled on why that's the case, why it is that men are not supporting them. However, I want this video right here to primarily focus in on black men and why it is that black men are in fact saying, nah, we're not exactly okay with Kamala Harris, even though I've shown you guys a lot of videos where they've basically said exactly what most people are saying, is that she's not really black, which of course the Democratic Party is trying to market her as a black woman when in fact she's half Indian, half Jamaican. Jamaican, of course, being a nationality. Of course, there's also other things in her past too, which by the way is going to come up in this video because comedian Eddie Griffin kind of, let's just say he kind of reacted to some of this, and you guys obviously saw a very small bit of that at the beginning of the video. But of course, Democrats are so desperate that they have to deploy Barack Obama. I want to give you guys a heads up. Obama is not going to be talked about in a sense of me going through his entire administration or anything like that. I talked a little bit about that in the previous video, the 12 o'clock video, where it was I focused in on the fact that when Obama was in office, the entire time he was there, all he did was whine. As a matter of fact, I believe the massive feminization of men intensified under Barack Obama and his administration. I don't think I need to go through every single example, but I'm pretty sure that there's a certain group, it just so happens to be men that are black, that are starting to notice the feminization of men. So Democrats, of course, they beg Obama to go out there. And of course, Obama goes into a precinct inside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a place where Democrats are not doing very well when it comes to getting their voters out there, or their would-be voters out there. And of course, he had this here to say.
Is that we have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. I'm going to speak to y'all directly and say that when you have a choice that is this clear, when on the one hand you have somebody who grew up like you, knows you, went to college with you, understands the struggles and pain and joy that comes from those experiences.
Obama outright lecturing black men, the brothers, is only going to backfire because they view Obama as the problem. All right? The extreme feminization of men, the change in the culture. Yeah, they think that right there was mostly Obama, which, by the way, a good portion of it was, in fact, Obama. I want to go ahead and say this really quick about that last part. Kamala Harris does not have the same lived experience as most black men, most black people in America. Every time you turn around, every time you ask her a question, she always responds with something like, I was raised a middle-class kid. I hate to tell you this, but 99% of black people in this country are not middle class. Most of them are working class or right below a certain line where they're out making over $250,000 a year. And a lot of that also is with whites too. It just so happens to be there's a lot more white people in the country, so therefore the percentage is obviously going to be a little bit more, how do I say, a little bit more skewed in one direction. Same thing with Hispanics. Not that many, of course, are, in fact, how do I say, above the $250,000 line, which I really think they need to change to $100,000, but that's a different video topic altogether. The fact of the matter is that Kamala Harris does not have the same exact experience as black men in America. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris was raised in Canada, not the United States. And she's very, very much the donor class darling. Then even they're starting to turn their backs on her because they realize exactly how terrible she is as a candidate. The woman can't even get the teleprompter correct or the script. The point is this right here. At this moment in time, black men especially are looking at the Democratic Party and they're saying, no, we don't want to vote for you. And of course, like I said, we'll get back to Obama a little bit later on this video. However, there is one more thing that needs to be thrown out there. You've been hearing the Democrats talk a lot about Project 2025. Well, the thing about their talking points on Project 2025 is that it's not gaining any traction. So they've chosen to go with a new tactic, and that new tactic is Agenda 47. Which we've been saying that was the actual agenda that Trump wanted. It was not Project 2025. But of course, Democrats are now deciding to change tactics because none of the tactics that they're throwing out there are actually working. There's a reason why you've seen these people more recently attack voters in particular. A lot of it is because they know that they did not have the turnout to get over against the Donald, who always finds a way to overperform and always finds a way to close out strong in these elections. So I came across this little video clip earlier this morning, and I figured I would react to some of it. And then, of course, I would react to Byron Donalds on CNN because he made some extremely good points on why it is that black men have, in fact, woken up and said no to this. It's roughly 3 generations. The 3 generations have been voting Democrat this entire time. So you shouldn't be surprised that a certain subsection of black men, especially in black voters, have said, you know, maybe we should give Republican Party a chance because those 3 generations technically would be up. But let's look at this.
Trump's plan to homeschool families. All of this is about whites. Homeschooling, auto workers, all of this is about white people. This has nothing to do with you, black man. Because as Obama pointed out, the only history that Trump has with you is denigrating you. You remember he took out the full-page ad to have the Central Park 5 executed?
Well, for starters, nobody really and truly cares about the Central Park 5. I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, but there's also a theme here, a theme that you guys are going to pick up on here real soon because, of course, there's another influencer out there, black influencer, of course, that are being Roland Martin, who is always telling young black men not to go to work. Like I said, there's a theme here. There's a theme here that I think a lot of black men have figured out to go on top of Kamala Harris's past and to go on top of Kamala Harris not being one of them. And of course, I also laid out another reason for why it is that men are not feeling Kamala Harris in the previous video that I'll definitely come back to in this video here. So make sure you guys just stick with me for a second. But the point is this right here. Trying to bring up stuff like the Central Park 5, which, by the way, those men were not exonerated. What happened was the judge simply vacated the case once somebody came forward. But if you actually look at the evidence, actually study the evidence, go through it, you'll see that the same 5 people that were initially accused, yeah, they more than likely did it. We'll probably do that video at a later date. I'll have some updates later on this week on how exactly I'm going to handle the other channels. But still, the fact of the matter is this right here. Bringing up the Central Park 5 at this moment in time is not exactly helping black men out, but let's continue.
Executed. I heard a YouTuber say he doesn't care about that. A black YouTuber say he doesn't care about that. And you plan on voting, 20% of you under the age of 50. You plan on voting for him. Again, preventing World War III. Joe Biden has been a disaster for the economy, which is crazy. You're in here all right, but only in terms of being victimized by Trump white supremacist agenda. Protect Medicare and Social Security. What does any of this have to do with you, black man? I'm telling you nothing except for the things that I showed you. So therefore, as Obama said, why in the world would you vote for a man like this?
He would ultimately go on to say that voting for Donald Trump, black men voting for Donald Trump, is the equivalent of voting for the slave master. James Carville was on earlier. He was screaming and hollering that Trump's rally in MSG and a little bit later on this month is almost like the Nazi rally that occurred in February of 1939. Yeah, these people are unhinged. They're getting desperate. And, of course, this is what they do when they're losing. It's not exactly uncommon for Democrats and the liberal media to lash out at those who reject them just in time for the election because nobody's wanted to vote for them. This right here sounds like an extremely feminine quality. I talked about this in the earlier video about how it was that the party looks more and more feminine. That's the real reason why it is that men don't want to vote for it. It's just completely preachy. It's also full of jealousy, which is, once again, is another feminine quality, but let us continue. One thing about those feminine qualities is that, like I just said, they're pretty much the exact opposite of masculine. Well, masculinity traits can include success. It can include a certain level of toughness. It can also include, a can-do attitude, where it is you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And, of course, you don't sit around and whine all the time. However, one thing that is not a masculine trait but can be seen as a masculine trait in today's day, especially given the emotions or the emotional people that we have to deal with every day, is good old-fashioned research, which is something that Eddie Griffin, comedian of all people, actually did. And here's some of it.
Kamala Harris. Look at it. This woman wanna play black so bad, she went and erased her grandmama and replaced her grandmama.
As you can see there, it says that she died in July of 1960. And so this is a huge scandal.
And her fake grandmama is this black woman who died 4 years before she was born.
Nothing about this woman is real. And, of course, to go on top of this, black men in particular are rejecting this. But let's continue.
In her book, she got a picture standing next to this dead woman with a smile on her face. I wonder how that happened.
Grandma Beryl died in 1960, 4 years before Kamala Harris was born.
And you gonna deny your real grandmama being able to showing up at your inauguration if you happen to get elected, which ain't gonna happen. Everybody I talk to don't like it. Ain't nobody gonna vote for you. Here's your choices, America. The liar or the crook. I think I might be going with the crook, goddammit. Yeah, the crook. He's got a lot of in him, y'all. He got 3 baby mamas, 43 felony cases and counting. Selling high-top tennis shoes just like Michael Jordan. Got shot just like Tupac. The motherfucker gonna drop an album next.
That last bit about Trump having 3 different baby mamas and 42 felony counts, yeah, this right here is something that a lot of black men are beginning to relate to. It's also another reason why it is that a lot of black men, and people forget to tell you this, it's not just black men, it's black women too. They just don't intend on voting. You see, like I said, in order for Democrats to be able to win the way they've been winning, they have to have extremely high levels of black turnout to pull it off. It's kind of sort of how they were able to get Georgia barely by the skin of their teeth. It's part of the reason why it is they were able to keep Virginia or flip Virginia. It's also what makes them competitive here in the state of North Carolina where I live at, and Harris was campaigning right down the road last night. And of course, look, when Trump campaigned here back in 2019, I could hear the crowd from my house. I'm only about half a mile away from the facility. The fact of the matter is this right here. The enthusiasm for Kamala Harris is just not there. It's not there with young people either. I mean, if you go to the campus near my house, you don't see Harris wall signs like you saw in 2008 for Obama, in 2012 for Obama, even 2016 for Hillary Clinton. There's actually Trump signs in that Democrat area. It's absolutely ridiculous, absolutely amazing. But then we get to Byron Donalds, and we get right back to Obama, and we get right back to the lies of Obama, because once again, the gaslighting here is absolutely ridiculous. So outside of the Democratic Party being overly feminine, and of course the feminization of men, what are the reasons why black men in particular may be choosing Donald Trump? Well, I think taxes and the economy is probably the number one driver. Black people, of course, in particular, they're like, you know, we haven't gotten anything out of the Democrats for years, so maybe it's time that we, I don't know, maybe start looking at the other party. I mean, they typically tend to not come to us, but now since Trump's been around, they're at least making an effort, which, like I said, brings us to the conversation involving Byron Donalds on CNN. Let's watch some of this.
We turn to the topic of what Kamala Harris is doing this coming week, particularly Monday and Tuesday. She's got several events courting black voters. I know that you are talking about the black vote coming out, particularly black men, for Donald Trump. You're trying to help him along with that. To that point, can you talk specifically about what Donald Trump would do policy-wise in a second term to help black Americans?
Sure, and thank you for that question. What Donald Trump is going to do is going to be actually quite similar to what he did in his first term. When you lower tax rates, when you cut these reckless and crazy policies that are now in the Kamala Harris administration, and you cut those regulations down, what it does is it frees up the ability for businesses to thrive, for people to be able to earn more money, for them to be able to keep more money in their.
This right here is true. Okay, once you start to cut regulation, next thing you know, you'll start to see businesses begin to thrive. By the way, I want to say this really quick. During the riots in 2020, several black-owned businesses were destroyed. Who the hell donated to the Minnesota Freedom Fund? Who the hell helped set that up? Oh, that's right, Kamala Harris. She was bailing out the felons who were burning down those businesses, especially in Minneapolis. I think a lot of black men are starting to realize that obviously this woman right here is not exactly on their side. I think that's another reason why it is that so many black men are in fact choosing Donald Trump, or a lot of black people in general are just saying, you know what, I just don't want to vote this cycle because I really truly don't like her. It's just a little extra incentive about what Kamala Harris did in 2020. And of course, her running mate, Tim Walz, basically allowed the city to burn. That right there, of course, including a lot of those small black businesses. But still, though, we have more to get through, so let's get back to it.
Pockets. All of his economic policies actually have a stabilizing effect on prices, and they grow our economy. You couple that with his energy policies. He calls it drill, baby, drill. But what it is being energy dominant in the United States of America. That also allows for us to put a cap on these massive price increases under the Kamala Harris administration. What that means in particular for black families is that you have an ability to earn more money, keep more money, wages actually growing when you adjust them for inflation. And then the big stat, and this happened during the first Trump administration,
Now, gang, if you guys didn't notice that the last clip, the last little response I had, I didn't really mention taxes. You see, when you have your taxes low, it keeps more money in your pocket. Also, something else too, you typically tend to cut taxes on the wealthiest earners, which is going to come back up here in a second, because once again, we got to talk about the little theme, which I really think you guys are starting to pick up on, is actually jealousy, which we'll get to here in a second. If you cut the taxes for the business owners, they have more money to invest, they have more money to pay your salary. Something that, of course, Obama went on about back in 2012 when he kept on screaming that the wealthy need to pay their fair share, when in reality, the wealthy were actually paying a much, much higher tax bracket than people like myself, who at the time were only making about $8 an hour in his economy, which we'll talk about here in a second. Because obviously black people don't forget exactly the conditions of Barack Hussein Obama's economy, and what these black influencers, these race peddlers, were trying to get black people to do during the time he was in office, the message that they were trying to send to them. But still, though, what Byron Donalds is saying is 100% true. You see, if the country itself is doing well, as in, if it's doing well economically, black people typically tend to benefit from that. By the way, something else too needs to be said. No country has produced more black wealth than the United States, but let's continue.
Kamala Harris would say something like that, but we know that she's wrong because economically she's been wrong for the last 1,400 days. If you look at Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it cut tax rates across the board, mostly for middle-class families. So this is why wages adjusted for inflation for black families was higher under Donald Trump than any other administration in the history of our country. That is a record of economic success.
Let me just quickly play for you what former President Obama said exactly on this question of the economy a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it was pretty good because it was my economy. It wasn't something he did. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans had left me the last time. He didn't do nothing except those big tax cuts.
I would tell you guys who wants to tell him, but I'm pretty sure you guys have already figured out that Obama is basically in a lot of ways saying with those tax cuts, if he's taking credit for Trump's good economy, then that means he's saying that the tax cuts worked and Trump's economy was good, and I did not give you tax cuts, so therefore Trump's economy is good, but I'm actually going to take credit for it. It's very, very confusing. And I think that they do this on purpose because they know that their audience is not, how do I say, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're not smart enough to understand what he's doing? What I'm going to say is that he knows that the liberal voter themselves are much, much more emotionally tuned up. So therefore, when you're more and more and more emotionally tuned up, you therefore cannot think. Let me start before I get on Obama. Let me say this first. When America is doing good, black people are doing good. When America is doing good, Hispanic Americans are doing good. When America is doing well, everybody tends to be doing pretty good. Now, obviously, there are going to be some cases where people can't find work. And there are also cases where people don't want to go to work or don't want to actually do anything with their time that's actually productive, which is exactly what influencers like Roland Martin and even Obama to a certain degree have told people to actually do. That right there being black men. They've told them basically don't even go get a job. I remember that episode where Roland Martin decided to go after King Randall, a young man who's been trying to get people in his neighborhood, in his area, to actually become legitimate men because there's not enough fathers, male role models in the community. And Roland Martin basically chastised him for doing so. The man was trying to do something good in his community. And of course, he got chastised for basically trying to help out young black men. Obama was also in the same camp as well. And of course, you guys are seeing it with this current administration, Kamala Harris being the VP, but also being very, very much involved in a lot of the legislation that Joe Biden has signed. For example, the Inflation Reduction Act. She was the tie-breaking vote in that act, which, by the way, made our inflation way worse. And also at the exact same time, also went after wage earners who relied heavily on tips. I don't think I have to go through every single piece of legislation, but don't worry, in tomorrow's main video, that right there will be discussed because obviously there's tension going on between the Harris-Biden campaign. Now that that's out of the way, now let me go ahead and get to Obama. When Obama was in office, the GDP on average was roughly 1.5 to like 2.2%. Jobs were not getting created at a ridiculous rate. They were actually, how do I say, he promised shovel-ready jobs, and of course, shovel-ready jobs did not occur. He even joked about that. Also, something else, too, about Obama. I talked about this whining in the previous video. All he did was whine about the Bush economy and whine and cry about how it was that the wealthy should pay their fair share. Yet, every chance this guy got, or every time it was presented to him, he kept extending the Bush tax cuts throughout 2011, 2012, after saying he wanted to get rid of them. By the way, Obama had the Senate. He just did not have Congress at the time. Don't you think it's possible that maybe he could have, I don't know, maybe negotiated a brand new tax plan, something like that there, that would have probably helped. But of course, Obama was lazy. He did not try. And he was also extremely smug and he hated anybody who disagreed with him. Obama economy was stagnant. When Trump was in office, you had a GDP, I think there was a chart that was released that showed that the average GDP under Trump's administration ended up being 2.6%, and that was even with the pandemic closing down the country. I remember one time the GDP was as high as 4.6%, and I want to say it was right before the pandemic. Our economy was rolling. That wasn't Barack Obama who did that. That was Donald Trump, and guess what? Tax cuts actually worked. And by the way, those tax cuts weren't just on the wealthiest earners. The tax cuts were pretty much on everybody. Everybody got a tax cut. That right there, anybody who was working got a tax cut. Now, yes, some of these tax cuts are expiring, and of course, the final round of them will expire in 2025. But of course, if Kamala Harris is in office and they allow these things to expire, you're not going to have any money at all because with inflation the way it is, yeah, you're going to have to work an additional 20 hours to get where you were to get what you're getting at 30 hours this moment in time, which, by the way, they oftentimes tend to lie to you guys about and tell you that, yeah, we're creating a lot of jobs. But the thing is this right here, most of those jobs being created are, in fact, what? Part-time jobs. But I'm going to let Byron expand a little bit more before I close this video out.
How do you respond to that?
Very easily. I was working in finance during Barack Obama's administration. Let me tell you, the economy under his especially the last 5 years, was growing at about 1 to 1.5% per year. I think at the time, President Obama was saying that, this era of large economic growth is something of the past. We're going to have a more consistent economy. Well, in his words, a consistent economy meant one that barely grew. So when Donald Trump came in, he brought his tax cut policy in, which cut taxes across the board for everybody in our country, coupled the fact that he did cut massive regulations from the Obama administration. And what did we see? Economic growth in the United States went from 1.5% under Barack Obama to 3.5% under Donald Trump. Wages adjusted for inflation, like I said, because it's the truth, increased for every.
Byron is saying is 100% true. The country was prospering when Trump was in office. It's also the biggest reason why it is so many are going back to Trump because they realize what the Biden administration has done and Kamala Harris being the vice president. The fact that the media constantly tries to gaslight them And of course, they also play the jealousy card, which, by the way, is not exactly a masculine trait. It seems to me that black men are looking at this and they're saying, no, I don't think I want to vote for this. But I did tell you guys there was one more reason why it is that black men in particular are not going to be voting for Kamala Harris or refusing to vote for her. And that right there is because she, quite frankly, is a hoe. This woman is a hoe. I don't think I need to go through every single example with Willie Brown, district attorney, and the lead prosecutor in L.A. I don't think I need to go through all the Kwame Brown, Judge Joe Brown. I don't think I need to go through all that stuff there. Black men don't respect a woman who sleeps around. They don't respect a woman who goes horizontal or went horizontal to go vertical. White men don't respect it either. Hispanic men don't respect it either. White men just have to be a little bit more simpish, but that's a different topic altogether. But you guys, please tell me what you think in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys have got to say. Make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, share the video. Please leave a comment, cut the notifications on, and I'll see you guys later.